Benin City was always buzzing, like a song that never stopped playing. Between the rustle of palm trees, the honking danfos, and the hum of generators, life moved fast. But inside the tall gates of a silver-painted mansion on Eteet Road, there was peace, elegance, and silence. The house of Obi stood like a jewel, surrounded by trimmed hedges and marble floors that reflected the sun. Obi was a man of reputation. Tall, dark-skinned, and always in crisp kaftans, he owned several fuel stations and had shares in construction and logistics firms. People called him Oil King, though he rarely smiled at the name. His wife, Amora, ran Amora Luxe, a fashion brand worn by politicians' wives and Nollywood stars. They had it all: wealth, influence, beauty, and most importantly, privacy. But there was something missing. Inside all that wealth lived two small voices. Ada, their 7-year-old daughter, had the curious eyes of someone who saw more than she should. She was a quiet girl who loved her books and always held her brother's hand like she was protecting him. Chika, just 5, was playful, always trying to run off with someone's phone or hide inside closets. They were inseparable, and they were alone. The nannies came and went. Some stayed a month, others a week. Many found the house too strict, too cold, too quiet. Obi and Amora didn't have time to notice. Their days began before the sun rose and ended long after the children had gone to bed. They weren't neglectful out of cruelty, just consumed. Money had to keep flowing, and success required sacrifice. At first, the children complained. Ada would stand by the door crying when her mother left for work. Chika once slept by the front gate waiting for his dad. Over time, they stopped asking. They learned to smile when spoken to and play alone when no one looked their way. One Friday evening, as the family sat for dinner, one of the rare moments they all shared, Amora brought up the idea again. "We need someone permanent. A live-in help who can cook, clean, and stay with the kids," she said, poking at her grilled fish. "We've tried that, Amora. None of them stay," Obi replied. "Maybe this time, we try someone local. My cousin in Usulu said there's a girl, very calm, respectful, and hard-working. She just finished secondary school. Background checks. She has church references." That was all Obi needed to hear. A girl with church references sounded safe enough. The following Monday, she arrived. Her name was Ifweko. Thin, soft-spoken, with skin the color of roasted palm kernel, and eyes that always looked down when you spoke to her. She wore an old skirt and blouse, her belongings packed in a faded Ghana Must-Go bag. Amora introduced her to the children. "This is Ifweko. She will help look after you. Ada, show her your room." Ada nodded quietly and held Ifweko's hand. Chika waved shyly. From that moment, something changed. At first, it seemed like a blessing. Ifweko woke up before anyone else. She scrubbed the tiles till they shone, cooked meals without supervision, and somehow got the kids to sleep on time. Amora was impressed. Obi nodded in approval. One night, Amora whispered, "She might be the best one we've hired." Obi smiled. "Let's hope she stays." She stayed. Days turned into weeks, and Ifweko melted into the fabric of the home. The children grew attached to her, especially Chuka. He followed her around, called her Auntie Ifu, and even refused to eat unless she fed him. Ada, ever watchful, kept her distance, though she never said why. But then the house began to feel different. It started with little things. The food began to lose taste, even when freshly cooked. The air in the children's room felt unusually cold at night. Chika began to wake up crying, claiming he saw someone watching him in the corner of the room. Amora brushed it off as imagination. Then mirrors began to crack without reason. One in the hallway shattered as Amora walked by. The generator began to shut down at exactly 3:33 a.m. every morning, even when there was fuel. Obi laughed it off. "These are small things," he said. "This house is too big. Things happen." But Ada knew something was wrong. She became quieter than usual. She started drawing strange shapes in her notebook, circles with eyes, and houses with dark figures floating above them. When Amora asked about the drawings, Ada simply said, "It's Auntie Ifweko's friend." One night, as Obi returned from a late business dinner, he saw her, Ifweko, standing outside in the backyard, her eyes fixed on the moon. Her lips were moving, but there was no sound. When he called her name, she jumped and turned with a frightened smile. "Just praying, sir," she said quickly. Obi nodded, though something inside him felt off. Still, she hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, the house ran better than ever. Until she entered his study. He had forgotten his laptop on the table and walked in late one night to retrieve it. There, in the dim light, was Ifweko, her back turned, standing close to his bookshelf. When she turned around, her eyes glistened like wet coal. "Sir, are you lonely?" The question cut the air. Obi frowned. "Excuse me." She stepped forward slightly. "Some men are. Especially men who work too much. I can help. I know how to help." He stepped back. "Leave. Now." She didn't argue. She smiled and walked out. The next morning, she served breakfast like nothing happened. Obi didn't tell Amora. He didn't want trouble. Maybe he misread the moment, he thought. But that night, the lights flickered.
If you've watched up to this point and have enjoyed the story so far, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps our channel grow. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss another exciting African tale. Thanks for being part of the Fave African Tales family. Back to the video.
Chika began coughing in his sleep. Ada whispered in the dark, "They're coming again. The one she talks to." Obi sat up in bed, heart racing. Something wasn't right, but he still didn't know what. He would soon find out. And by then, it might be too late. The mornings no longer brought comfort. The once cheerful chirping of birds outside the Obi mansion was now drowned by an eerie silence that seemed to settle over the house like fog. The walls of the mansion, once glistening, felt like they were holding in secrets, breathing with a life of their own. Ada was the first to truly feel it. Ifweko now spent more time in the children's room, especially after bedtime. She'd sit in the corner while they slept, humming lullabies Ada had never heard before. Foreign tunes. Sometimes, Ada would wake in the night and find Ifweko standing over Chika, just watching him, unmoving. She would blink and Ifweko would smile, whisper something like "Shush, it's not yet your time," and walk out slowly. At breakfast, she remained the perfect help. She served akara and pap like nothing had happened. She laughed when Chika made jokes and spoke gently when Ada refused to eat. To Amora, Ifweko was a blessing. To Ada, she was a shadow with a face. One afternoon, while cleaning the children's wardrobe, Ada found something strange. Tucked beneath Chika's school uniform was a doll, not like any she'd seen before. It had no face, just a smooth black surface, and its hands were tied with red thread. Ada took it to her mother. "Where did you get this?" Amora asked, eyebrows raised. "In Chika's clothes. I think Ifweko put it there." Amora laughed softly. "Ada, don't start again. You're always imagining things. Maybe it's a toy from school." "It's not a toy. It smells like ashes." "Enough," Amora said, dropping the doll in a drawer. "Don't speak badly of someone who helps us." Ada looked down. Even at 7, she understood what it meant when adults didn't listen. But she also knew what she saw. That night, Chika had a fever. It rose quickly, burning through his little body. He shook with chills and spoke gibberish in his sleep. The family doctor came, prescribed medicine, and left, but the fever didn't break. Ifweko stayed by his side the entire time. She fed him bitter tea, wiped his forehead, and whispered into his ears when no one was looking. The next morning, he was better. Too quickly. He jumped out of bed as if nothing had happened. "See?" Amora said. "She's God-sent." Obi nodded, but he was troubled. He hadn't forgotten the night in his study, nor the way Ifweko's eyes seemed to glow in the dark. He started to watch her more closely. Late one night, he installed a small security camera in the living room, just to be sure. What he saw the next morning made his skin crawl. At exactly 2:11 a.m., Ifwako walked into the living room. She was barefoot, wearing only a thin white wrapper. She moved to the center of the room and stood there, unmoving for minutes. Then, she lifted her arms and began to speak, not in any known language, but in sounds that grated the ear, tongues of something ancient, something wrong. The air around her shimmered, and the lights flickered. Then came the laugh, high, childlike, and echoing. Not hers. Something else. Obi turned off the footage. He couldn't breathe. What was this girl? Who had they allowed into their home? He confronted Amora that morning. We need to let her go. Why? What did she do? I saw her last night. She's not normal. Are you listening to yourself, Obi? You're a grown man talking like a child. We needed help. We got help. Now you want to send her away? Based on what? A feeling. He tried to show her the video, but the footage was gone. The file had been deleted. He searched the memory card. Nothing. Let it go, Obi, Amora said. You're overworked. Rest. He didn't argue. Not yet. That week, the house descended further into darkness. Lights flickered constantly. Water taps ran brown. Mirrors steamed even when there was no heat. Ada drew more symbols, this time with the word Mum scribbled next to a crying face. One evening, as the family prepared for dinner, Amora suddenly fainted. She collapsed while reaching for her wine glass. Ifwako was the first to rush to her side. She placed her hands on Amora's forehead and whispered something. Amora woke moments later, dazed but fine. The doctors found nothing wrong. Low blood sugar, they said. Stress. But Ada had seen it. Just before her mother fell, she saw Ifwako standing by the doorway, smiling faintly and mouthing words with her hands folded. The final straw came the second time Ifwako tried Obi. It was storming outside. Rain poured heavily, and thunder rattled the windows. Obi was in his study again, trying to read, but his eyes kept returning to the door. A chill crept down his back, the kind that came just before something terrible. She entered quietly, not knocking. She wore a silk nightgown that wasn't hers. I'm sorry, she said softly. I needed to talk. Obi stood. Ifwako, I don't think. I'm not like other girls, she said. You must have known that by now. Her eyes flickered, no longer brown, but a glint of silver in them. The lights above them dimmed. Whatever you're doing here, stop it, Obi said, firm now. They chose me, she said, stepping closer. And I chose your home. Your blood is sweet. Your children are ripe. Don't ruin this. That was when he slapped her, hard and fast. She didn't cry. She only smiled. It has begun, she whispered and turned, walking out slowly. He locked the door behind her. His hands trembled. He had to protect his family. The next day, he called an old friend, Pastor Dimaji, a spiritual man who once helped him through a near-death experience years ago. Come to the house. I think we're in danger. And as he hung up, a scream echoed from the children's room. He ran upstairs. Ada stood frozen by the wall. There, scrawled in dripping red across the wallpaper, were the words, "You should have let me in." Benin sky hung low that morning, a grey, heavy blanket. Rain threatened but didn't fall. It was the kind of day that felt like a warning. Inside the Obi mansion, silence reigned. Everyone had grown cautious. Amora moved more slowly, her laughter vanished. Obi stayed home more often now, pretending to work from his study but always watching, listening. Ada never let Chika out of her sight. And Ifwako? Ifwako still smiled. But her smiles were like cracks in porcelain, pretty, but fragile. And dangerous. Pastor Dimaji arrived just after noon, in a white shirt and worn jeans. A man in his late 50s, his presence was calming, but his eyes missed nothing. He walked into the mansion and immediately paused. "This house is too quiet," he murmured. "Too cold." Obi explained everything, the drawings, the symbols, the behavior, the deleted footage. Pastor Dimaji listened, nodding. Then he asked to see the children. He prayed quietly over them, placing a hand on each of their heads. Chuka squirmed, but Ada stood still, watching Ifweko, who stood in the kitchen doorway, her face blank. "She watches us," Ada whispered. "Even when her eyes are closed." Pastor Dimaji walked past Ifweko without a word and went straight to the guest room, where he set up a prayer space. Candles, a small wooden cross, anointing oil. He would fast and pray for 3 days, he said. That first night, nothing happened. The house felt tight, tense, as though holding its breath. Ifweko didn't serve dinner. She disappeared into her room after dusk and didn't emerge. But in the middle of the night, Ada screamed. Obi and Amora ran into the children's room. Ada was shaking violently, her sheets soaked with sweat. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. "She said she'll take Chuka," she sobbed. "She said the gate is open now." Obi carried his daughter to the living room, where Pastor Dimaji waited, already awake, already praying. "The gate," he muttered. "There's been a crack in the spiritual wall. Someone, or something, is coming." They prayed until morning. By the second day, Ifweko no longer spoke to anyone. She didn't clean, didn't cook. She stayed in her room, door locked. But at night, her whispers returned. Obi placed his ear against her door and heard things, voices not her own, laughter that sounded both old and young. He recoiled. He asked Amora again. "Let her go. This is no longer a maybe. She's dangerous." But Amora was exhausted. "We can't just throw her out. What if she reacts? What if she curses us? Then we fight back. With prayer. With light. With truth." That night, Pastor Dimaji blessed the house. He moved from room to room, speaking words of power, casting oil on walls, rebuking shadows. In the children's room, the air became thick. When he prayed over Chuka's pillow, it burst open. Inside was not cotton, but feathers dyed black, and a small jar filled with red sand. Amora screamed. Chuka began to cry. Even Obi took a step back. "She's not working alone," the pastor said. "She's a gatekeeper. The ritual is almost complete." "Ritual? What ritual?" Amora asked, trembling. "A house like yours, full of bloodline, wealth, innocence, it's a perfect offering for their kind. Once she marks all 4 of you, the house will become a nest. A gateway. So what do we do?" Obi asked. "We confront her. Before the final seal is placed. Before the full moon. Tomorrow night." That night passed without sleep. By the 3rd morning, Obi had enough. He knocked on Ifweko's door. No answer. He kicked it open. The room was empty. Except it wasn't. The walls were covered in writing, strange glyphs, some written in what looked like charcoal, others in what smelled like dried blood. In the corner, a small altar stood, for dolls, one for each member of the family, pinned with black thorns and surrounded by ashes. Amora gasped. Pastor Dimaji took one look and said, "She's preparing for the final rite. Tonight." That evening, just before sunset, the family gathered in the living room. Pastor Dimaji placed the children between Obi and Amora and began to pray aloud. Psalms, fire, declarations. The atmosphere shifted. The lights blew out. The doors slammed shut. And from the stairs came laughter. Ifweko stood there. But it wasn't Ifweko anymore. Her eyes glowed red. Her skin seemed to shimmer like scales. Her voice echoed with layers, a girl's voice, a man's voice, and something else. "You should not have called him," she hissed. "You were all mine. I was chosen. "You are not welcome here," Pastor DiMaggi shouted. She raised her hands and wind erupted inside the house, howling, chaotic.
If you've watched up to this point and have enjoyed the story so far, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps our channel grow. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss another exciting African tale. Thanks for being part of the Fave African Tales family. Back to the video.
Furniture flew. The chandelier crashed. Amora covered the children. Obi charged forward with the cross from the prayer altar, yelling, "Leave my house!" She screamed, a sound that split the air. But she backed away. "They sent me. You let me in. You let me feed. No more." Pastor DiMaggi roared, anointing oil flying from his hands like fire. Light burst from the ceiling. A great crash. A sound like thunder and glass shattering all at once. Then silence. When their eyes opened, she was gone. The room was in shambles. Candles flickered back to life. The children sobbed quietly. Pastor DiMaggi collapsed into a chair. "It's done," he whispered. "But the scars, they will take time to heal." Obi and Amora sat on the floor, holding their children close. That night, they didn't sleep in separate rooms. They stayed together, under one roof, without servants, without distractions. And for the first time in years, they saw each other. Not through titles, not through wealth, but as a family. Weeks passed. The Obi mansion on Et Road stood still, quieter than it had ever been. The walls had been repainted, the floors polished, the symbols washed off. But the memories lingered, like perfume, like smoke, like the remnants of a dream that refused to fade. Ada still woke up sometimes crying, but not from fear. Chika clung to his parents more than ever, no longer the hyper boy running through hallways. Amora enrolled them in weekend counseling at their church. Pastor DiMaggi still visited, though less frequently. He often said, "Where darkness once stood, light must be planted." The gate that once welcomed strangers now remained firmly shut. Amora had terminated all domestic staff. No more nannies. No more cooks. They hired a day cleaner who left before sunset. Everything else, they now did as a family. Obi, the man who once lived in his phone, now woke Ada up for school. He made breakfast, even if it was just toast and eggs. He drove them himself when he could. And on Sundays, he no longer slipped away to meetings. He sat in the pew beside Amora, hand in hand with his wife. Their business didn't crumble. It didn't fall apart. But it slowed, and they were okay with that. Because they had nearly lost something far more valuable than money. One afternoon, as the Harmattan breeze drifted through the curtains, Ada walked up to her mother, holding a drawing. Amora braced herself, more symbols, more dark eyes, perhaps. But it wasn't. It was a house, their house, drawn in yellow crayon, surrounded by the four of them, all smiling. "This is how it feels now," Ada said softly. "Warm, safe." Amora broke down in tears. One evening, they invited Pastor DiMaggi for dinner. The table was full, jollof rice, grilled chicken, fried plantain. Laughter echoed once more in the marble halls. "You know," the pastor said as he chewed thoughtfully, "evil doesn't always come as a storm. Sometimes it comes as a whisper. As help." Obi nodded. "And we opened the door." "Yes," the pastor said, looking at the children. "But you closed it. That matters more." That night, after dinner, they sat outside. The stars looked brighter somehow. Ada pointed to the sky and asked if angels really watched from above. "Yes," Obi replied, hugging her close. "But they need our help, too. We have to do our part." Amora lit a small candle and placed it on the balcony ledge. No reason, just a habit now. A small flame, glowing against the dark. They never found Ifueko. Her real name, her origin, everything she told them turned out to be false. The cousin Amora spoke to never existed. The number became unreachable. It was as if Ifueko had never been real, but she had been. Her presence had scarred the house, but it had also saved it in a strange, bitter way, because it woke them up. To each other. To what truly mattered. One day, as Amora walked past the children's room, she heard Ada whispering, not in fear, but in prayer. God, please keep bad spirits far away. Let our house always be filled with your light. Amora stood at the door and smiled. The house was whole again. But they would never forget. And maybe that was the point. Not to forget the darkness, but to remember the fight. The cost. The light that overcame it. The house of gold stood tall once more. Not because of the tiles or the marble or the tall gates, but because within its walls now lived something far more powerful. Love. And vigilance.